Hi everyone, hope you are all well. Well, today we're here to talk to the fantastic Kate Muir. So I'm just going to wait to let her in and let a few of you in as well. Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking shortly to the fabulous Kate Muir about her new book. So I'm just going to wait to let Kate in and say hi to a few of you. Hope you're all well. So while I'm waiting to let Kate in, many of you know, she's the producer of the Channel 4 documentary Davina Mcall, Sex, Myths and the Menopause. I'm sure loads of you watched that amazing documentary. Kate's actually currently working on a second documentary as well, so we're going to be talking about that. And we're also going to be talking about her new book today, so I'm just going to let Kate in. Hi Kate, I can see you've joined. You just need to ask to join and then I can let you in. Oh, Mandy's away on a romantic break, allegedly, with Kate's book by her bed, lol. Right, let me just let Kate in. It's not a very romantic break, is it really? Hi Kate.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Really, really busy actually. Mid-next documentary and it's bonkers. But amazing that we're back here again, you know, because I just the last documentary, didn't I? So what a year.
I know, and I was just before you came on. I was just obviously, for those who don't know Kate, but I'm sure everyone does. Kate is obviously, as a lot of you know, a Scottish writer and filmmaker, and obviously she's the producer of the Channel 4 documentary Sex, Myths and the Menopause, which Davina Mcall presented brilliantly. And as you say, currently working on the second documentary. But Kate and I are here today to talk about her new book. And Kate, I was just saying before you joined as well that I think we spoke, I think it was at autumn 2019 when you were just starting to research. Was that when you started?
I've been going from then. I was trying to make a documentary and then I ended up writing the book in lockdown when the whole documentary shut down. American academics were doing nothing in lockdown, so I could ring them at midnight and demand that they answer my difficult questions about menopause. So it was actually, you know, one of those lockdown things that might not have happened. I don't think I'd have researched it in that kind of really pernickety way.
Yeah.
including your dad. He's got a whole new chapter in the book, hasn't he?
Yeah, well, I mean, so a little bit of background very quickly, and then I want to talk about the book. So I think it was 2019, and I had an email from the lovely Kirsty Lang, who introduced us, and you were very keen, obviously, to sort of hear a little bit about my journey, but also much more about having a chapter in your book about breast cancer and demystifying everything around HRT. So obviously we put you in touch with my father, Professor Baum, for those who don't know, is now a retired breast cancer professor. But we are here to talk about the book. So I'm sorry it's back to front, Kate, but there we go. I've never worked that one out yet. But tell us, look, so, I mean, look, you and I did an Instagram Live a year ago, I think, and you talked about your Thelma and Louise sort of car crash moment. But do you want to tell everyone a little bit about why you wrote the book and decided to do the documentary? And obviously, let's start with a little bit of your story first.
Yeah, well, as I talked to you before about it, I had a real car crash of a menopause, and out of that, I went privately, which was a terrible mistake. Got really very dodgy bioidentical hormones because my doctor basically turned me down when I had heart palpitations, and of course, everything improved when I was on hormones. The heart palpitations went, the brain fog went. And the person I visited was, of course, the famous Dr. Louise Newson, who was less famous back then in 2019. And when I got in there, she sorted me out in about 5 minutes with my hormones. And then I started interviewing her. And she told me this story of this woman who had come to her, who had been a nursery nurse, no, a nursery teacher, and had got incredible brain fog and depression in perimenopause, had been tried on every single antidepressant there was, diagnosed with incurable depression, giving 12 sessions of electroshock treatment across her head in a mental hospital. Went home and just basically lay there in front of the television for 7 years, couldn't walk her dog, couldn't leave the house, completely agoraphobic, awful story. And she came eventually, she rented a van and came eventually to Louise Newson's surgery and got hormones. And about a week later, she left the house and walked her dog and got her life back. And she'd had 7 years of just not existing. And I thought, I can't let that happen to anyone else. I had no idea that, you know, hormones were about your mental health. Your hormone health is your mental health. And that has become a huge message, I think, for us all in this movement. And I thought, right, if I didn't know that, I've got to make a documentary. I've got to tell people. I've been a journalist all these years. I have the skills, but I don't know anything about this subject. So I was ringing you. I was ringing Diane Danzebrink. I was downloading Louise Newson's brain. And then I interviewed just everyone in the menopause space one by one. And this book appeared with much struggle, I have to say, 3 rewrites. Because, you know, I got so into the science, it stopped making any sense to anyone except a menopause scientist. So I really had to pull back and realize this was about women and put a lot of myself in there, which I found quite embarrassing. And I found it difficult. And I wrote about my mother having Alzheimer's and the effect of estrogen on Alzheimer's. And I'm not the sort of person who does that. I'm usually the person who's asking the questions. So I found that very difficult, but actually really cathartic in the end to talk about my own journey and the mess I'd made of my own life. And now it's great, you know, it's a lot better. But I think we're also honest in this space. I think that
I think I mean I've got about, I counted today, over 17 books on the menopause on my bookshelf, but none of them are quite like yours. There's many written by some brilliant doctors, obviously, as you said, Louise Newson and Philippa Kay, and I've got Mariella's book, and oh gosh, so many others I can't even remember. But yours and Davina Mcall, there's a quote on the front that says, "A forensic journalist and a menopause warrior," and it's a forensic deep dive into what has gone wrong over these last 2 decades and why we're suffering. And honestly, hats off to you, Kate, because the attention to detail and the unpicking, you're basically were like a sort of a forensic scientist who was not going to leave any stone unturned. So that was an arduous task for you. I mean, who did you speak to? I mean, I've read the book, but a lot of people haven't yet. So who did you speak to and where did you begin?
Well, I began with Louise, but then I rang everybody that came up, and I was talking to kind of Philip Sarell at Yale, who's done this superb work on the numbers of women with hysterectomies in America who were never given HRT and hence died early, thousands and thousands and thousands of them from cardiac disease because they weren't given their estrogen back. And I interviewed all the kind of heavyweights who had been involved in dissecting the WHI scandal that said all HRT was going to give you breast cancer back in 2002, yeah. 2002. And so I interviewed them, and, you know, I talked to the head of, at that point, the International Menopause Society, Susan Davis in Australia, about her experiments with testosterone and memory on women's brains. So I talked to some of the French scientists who were way ahead on kind of transdermal estrogen and progesterone. They were way ahead on the gold standard HRT, and they'd done the work looking at really, really good HRT, the safest kind, and proved that it was safe, and proved that it was safe for 5 years. So thank you, France. But was there any research in Britain? Not really. And there was a lot of American research. But what astonished me at the end of all this was all the black holes in research, where you would think if we were men, there would be answers like, you know, how does testosterone change the way a woman's brains work? What does testosterone do in a woman's body? Why is it our biggest hormone? You know, how does it decline? What does estrogen do in the brain? How does estrogen affect Alzheimer's? How does estrogen affect dementia? I mean, it just makes me rage that this science has not been brought out before.
And I think, I mean, there's a few things to say on the subject, because obviously we never used to live past the age of menopause anyway. So people
Yeah.
would sort of, the average age people would die before they were 50. So you know, in those days, it wasn't so much of an issue. And then as we're sort of living longer, and particularly these last 2 decades, and we're working longer, I think like myself, like you, and thousands of other women who have just suffered terribly and been let down by what was basically this flawed trial. And I think, you know, now it's amazing. There's just so many women and celebrities and MPs and campaigners and doctors all coming together and talking about it, which is absolutely brilliant. But you know, as you say, I'm actually just going to read literally in the beginning of Kate's book, and it made me laugh, but you literally say, imagine for a delirious moment that men got symptoms of the menopause. A bloke walks into his doctor's surgery, he starts grumbling, my penis is getting all dry and wrinkly, it's agony to have sex, what's the point anyway? And obviously you go on, you know, and put all those symptoms in the space of a man. And yes, it's funny, but it's absolutely true. It's this, women have suffered in silence. Men would never have put up with this. So why do you think we have? I mean, you know, what's going on there?
I think there's about 2 or 3 things happening. One is obviously ageism and the worth of a woman after she's fertile, which is obviously 0 in the scientific world. And so once you're a goner, you know, why do we need to worry about you? You've made us our children, off you go. We don't care about what you're going to do in your careers and your later life, so you can decline gently. Why do we need to study that? Why do we need to care about that? But it's also women themselves not talking about it. And I think the great thing about British women is we do not give a fuck, and we are. But in America, where I'm doing this new research, you know, I'm looking at Hollywood and I'm Googling away, I'm going, who's talking about menopause in Hollywood? And then, you know, the new Sex and the City drama, you know, here are all these women in their 50s and they're not talking about menopause really at all. And, you know, I'm just like, it's just so unnatural, I think. So yeah, there's that, and there was just this wall of medical sexism. And Lisa Mosconi, who wrote the XX Brain in New York about what happens to your brain in menopause and Alzheimer's, says it's bikini medicine. Basically, we are men treated as men, and then they add on a little bit about breasts and, you know, gynecology, but actually they don't look into the female brain, and they don't care about the female brain. And as sort of we've all learned, and you've learned, menopause goes on in your brain, doesn't it? And, you know, estrogen is not just a sex hormone, really, in that sense. It's a brain hormone. And the sooner we understand what's happening in our brains, and we've got a nice bit on this in the upcoming documentary, the sooner we understand that, the better we understand ourselves. Because, I mean, I was astonished, you know, in pregnancy that my brain was going to rewire. And you are aware that your brain turns to mush at the end of pregnancy, and you're la la la. And then suddenly you're multitasking because you're trying not to kill your baby and do the shopping and go back to work. And, you know, there's that moment where you realize my brain has to work at triple the speed and be much more accurate because people may die, small people may die. And so your brain does this amazing rewiring, and it does this rewiring around menopause. And we don't know. What I'm really interested in, no research, does it rewire differently on HRT? You know, what happens without the HRT? But are we rewiring ourselves on a plateau and making ourselves into superhumans? I've no idea. But, you know, I felt like a clapped out banger before I was on HRT. Now I feel like a Tesla. I'm just because every day I get up and I feel at the same level. And I had, you know, periods and premenstrual tension, and I was always, I always worked through it, and we all work through it. And I'm not saying I had a really bad case of it, but it was, you never knew quite what was going to hit you in the morning. I know in the morning I'll get up, I'll put on my HRT, and I will roll in and do some work. And that, I think that's maybe an amazing gift that we've given ourselves. And, I thought it all through yet. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's interesting you say that. I had a sort of one of those, another light bulb moment this week. I was going out for dinner with friends, and I had a hysterectomy, so I'm only on estrogen, only HRT. So for women who don't know that, if you don't have a womb, you only need the estrogen because it's the progesterone that protects the lining of the womb. So, and I was saying, and as a teenager, through my periods and with the terrible period pain, and also, you know, going up to the age of 40, I used to have these terrible cravings, always around, you know, the sort of dips like that, and I'd always immediately rush for chocolate or just something sweet. And it was this, you know, and it was a bit of a sort of binge eating cycle of when my hormones were up, I was going for chocolate, and then when they were down, I was fine. And since my hysterectomy, I've never had a single craving at all. I'm very much like that. I feel very balanced. And I was like, I hadn't thought about that, but I think we're so kind of, our hormones literally, you know, it's our whole world and our whole week and our whole day revolves around them. And I think, you know, I learned, and obviously you've found, that we have estrogen receptors all over our body, so it's no wonder if we're depleted. We've got that brain fog, we've got the itchy skin, we've got the, you know, vaginal atrophy. What surprised you when you were, I mean, obviously you must have learned a hell of a lot, but what surprised you the most from, you know, your journey of writing this book?
I think the research into the brain and Alzheimer's, and the research done by again Lisa Mosconi in New York about how stages, the brilliant research done by Dr. Roberta Brinton, who is a scientist in Arizona, and she's been studying the female brain for about 20 years, since actually one of her mentors died of Alzheimer's. It's really interesting, the effect of HRT on Alzheimer's, when you look at the insurance studies in America, and that the women on transdermal HRT seem to get less Alzheimer's, less Parkinson's, diseases like that. And you just think, oh, this could be a huge thing for the future of female health. And it's just sort of, it's massive.
That is massive. And the, you know, the long-term health benefits, so many, you know, even now my friends, and I've been talking about this for years now, that, you know, when I say that it, you know, it can reduce the risk of heart disease and prevents osteoporosis and hopefully Alzheimer's, I mean, that, you know, there are massive gains to be had. I'm not saying everyone should be on it, but it just seems
everyone's on it now. That's my new thing. I've thought about it, and obviously I understand there are the 1 in 7 women with breast cancer, some of whom cannot necessarily take HRT. There are the people with, you know, all these other kinds of cancers that can't take it. But when you look at the longevity, the protection for your heart and bones, and you think, we were not made to live this long, and and, you know, why should we live unhappy lives with creaky joints? And, you know, I look down the road at my neighbour, who I've been getting her shopping for 2 years now because of COVID. So I talk to her a lot, and she's a doctor actually, and she's 92, and she's bent over on a Zimmer frame, and her mind is rolling. She's just absolutely on it, but she's always looking at the ground, and she has to lean back on the sofa at the door to talk to me when I bring in her shopping, so she can make eye contact with me. And it's osteoporosis. And here's a sort of genius who's looking at the ground all the time, and she's 92. And I just think, oh God, how your life could have been different. And, you know, she's read my book actually, and she says, I'm a doctor, I didn't know any of this stuff. And, you know, I think, oh my God, a 92-year-old woman has read this and is learning from it. And I wish we could do something for people like her and people like my mum. And so, in retrospect, a great sort of sorrow as I learn new things. I feel kind of really moved by the fact, you know, we can maybe help, you know, the upcoming generation carrying the.
But I think we will. I think we have, because the fact is there's no turning back now, and there's so many people talking about it. And you know, I know you interviewed Avram Blooming, who the author of Estrogen Matters, and you know, for again anyone that hasn't read it or hasn't watched any of our interviews with Dr. Blooming, his wife and daughter had or have breast cancer, and they are both on it. So even women who have had or had breast cancer, have an informed joint discussion with your oncologist, with your doctor, you know, take everything with you, you know, with you. Be prepared, because it's not a blanket no. And at the end of the day, it's about medicine's about quality of life and length of life. And if you are suffering, I mean, I've talked to you, Kate, before about this woman who's in Scotland, who was suicidal, absolutely suicidal. She'd had breast cancer and she was in the deepest, darkest depression. And it was quite simple. You know, the chance of suicide was 99%. Versus having HRT, and the risk of her getting a recurrence in her breast cancer was incredibly low. So it was a no-brainer. And she eventually, she came to Diane, she came to me, she came to my dad, she went to Louise in the end, traveled hundreds of miles, got the treatment, and is living life to the full now. And she said she would rather have the next 20 years or 30 years or whatever quality life than the black hole she was living in. So, and you've heard thousands of stories like this, you know, and so have I, and so many others. Tell me about the second documentary. I mean, when is that coming out, and what are you focusing on?
We're doing menopause in the workplace, which everyone is talking about and everyone's putting out policies about, but is it actually happening in real life? Find out here. We have got some astonishing research, and some of it just came in today, and I was like, oh my God, this is nuclear. And it's really, I can't tell you about it, but there's a couple of things in that documentary that are just completely new, and I think will change women's lives. I mean, for the better, but I think it will really shock people. And we've got a lot of wonderful key workers who've been working through, you know, the pandemic and struggling with menopause. And, you know, stuff like we all know, 50% of nurses are over 50 and a third want to leave their jobs. Think about the loss in expertise there, because it's not just like hiring a 22-year-old nurse and paying for their training. It's 30 years of walking in and handling shit, literally, and everything else, and having instincts and having empathy and having knowledge. And you think, oh my God, if those women are walking out of their jobs, what is this country losing? And why aren't we caring about that? That's the bit, you know, the NHS could invest in. And in my book, I've got a friend who's a nurse who lives down and she was about to leave her job and, you know, take a job injecting Botox into people's faces as a nurse, because you get paid much more money for it. And she was on the vaccination crew, and she was going into kind of the cupboard in the bathroom to cry between doing sessions of vaccinations, because she just had such anxiety and brain fog and stress and pandemic. And then she got HRT privately, even though there was a menopause clinic in her hospital, and felt fantastic about a week later, and then ended up working on the COVID ward as the family liaison officer. And you think of all the jobs in all the world, taking iPads, you know, to people who are dying, and also helping people to get through that and get out of the COVID ward. And you think, if that woman had disappeared, how many people's lives would been affected by her disappearing? And so I think we really, really need to care, because there's obviously a sort of elite of people that know about all the best HRT, and we all talk about it, but I think we have to get out there into communities, into economically deprived communities, and really, really help people on the ground. And I think because this movement is so new, we can be much more inclusive and diverse than kind of previous feminist movements. We think about it from the beginning. And, you know, every time I go on a panel, I think, who else is on this panel? Who are they speaking for? What communities are they speaking for? And I think, you know, there's a huge working class or economically deprived situation where people are not getting the treatment they deserve and not hearing about it, and not necessarily having data on their phones to go on the Balance app or whatever. So I think it's up to us who find out to kind of spread the word. And you know, Katie, every time you spread the word, you think, oh, I'm so sick of talking about menopause. And then the next day, you meet someone in the shop and you say, oh, you know, you could do that or do that. And, you know, they go, oh my God, I could? And you go, yeah, you could. And then a week later, they're like, do you know what? I've slept through the night for the first time in 10 years. And you go like, yeah, I gave you that. I'm so pleased, you know, that this is such good news that we're giving to people, that I feel that every time I wake up, I think I have to tell someone else. I have to get this out there. What am I going to do next?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, it's funny. My uncle, who sadly died, my father's brother, was a professor of pediatrics, and I grew up with his this mantra that was the starfish story of a little boy on a beach, and he was throwing starfish back into the sea, and this old man said, why are you doing that? Because you're not going to be able to help them all. And he said, well, if I can help even just one starfish survive, then I'll be happy. And I think every time I feel like you, and I'm like, oh God, I've been talking about this for about 7-8 years now. And then you remember, you just, you know, you can just change one person's life, and you know, it's amazing. And look, I mean, there's now the menopause task force. You know, obviously lots of us have given evidence, which is fantastic. And Carolyn Harris is, you know, the revolution, and all, you know, your work, and Louise and Diane and Davina, and everyone coming together. I do believe, you know, change is coming. I think it's great you're getting out there into other communities, because there's a lot more to be done. Talk to me very quickly about the menopause charity, because we've got about a couple minutes, and I just want to read some of the messages for you.
Yeah, well, I think the charity, you know, came from nowhere, went from strength to strength. I think is motoring along nicely now, and is very good. It's doing a very good campaign on testosterone just now, which is fantastic, because we're very interested in that. But I think the main thing we did was, just after the Davina program, we worked with News and Health and 14 Fish, and came up with that Confidence in the Menopause course, the free course online, which takes like 6 to 10 hours, actually more than that to do, and has HRT prescribing in it. And I think now 20,000 doctors and healthcare professionals have taken that course, and you think there are 20,000 people equipped out there, and if they each reach out to 100 patients, we have changed the kind of whole situation. And you know, apart from, you know, knowledge for women, but education in medical schools, education. And I am still looking at very, very senior figures in the menopause industry writing not clearly about the different kinds of HRT, and saying HRT could cause breast cancer, but never mind, and you could go for a run. I'm going, no, we need to talk about body identical HRT, the safest HRT, and we need to always talk about transdermal HRT. And we should all be using transdermal estrogen. The idea that we're not, and it has all these protective effects, and it doesn't cause clots and, you know, strokes, and it helps your cardiac, you know, your heart health. I mean, it is extraordinary that people are still talking about this old stuff as though it was the same product, and it's not the same product, and it's sloppy science. It's bonkers. There must be pharmaceutical companies or something making a lot of money out of it, but I don't understand that. Do you? Can you explain
well,
that?
I just wonder whether there are any other sort of medical conditions that sort of, you know, we all talk about this, and it's a very, I suppose, well, it's not a small area of women's health, it's a massive area. But, you know, I do find it shocking. I mean, just while you're on the subject of testosterone, I actually wrote to Dr. Blooming, and I asked my dad about this latest piece of research about whether there's a potential benefit to women's heart health. And at the moment, the evidence is, you know, they're on the fence. There's not enough. But I think the bottom line is about that, is that until there are bigger trials and you know, there's more sort of work done around this. And, you know, as we all know, medical school training becomes compulsory. I think we're on a slow burner. I mean, you know, things are changing, but it's not just, the thing is, it's not just in this country. You know, we're doing really, really well. And I did a menopause masterclass Tuesday night, and we had a woman from Sweden, Australia and America, and there was no information. I mean, it was like talking to someone in the 1970s. So I know, obviously, one of the aims of the menopause charity is to get out there internationally and for collaborative work, you know, right across the globe. I just want to really quickly, I want to just read, there was a comment here. Kate, please tell everyone about how you look after, that's up to you if you want to, look after my Cancer Plus menopause community, Healthy Whole Me.
Oh yeah, Jemima. And yeah. And yeah, I know. We've done a thing with Trek Stock. Hopefully that will be in the documentary, but we can't talk about it.
No, we'll keep quiet on that. Someone else says, too many heartbreaking stories. The fight is real. Kate's book should be in every GP practice. Absolutely. While I'm reading these, and obviously I'm holding it up again, where can people get it? Is it on the usual Amazon and in?
On Amazon. I doubt it's in many. because why would they stock something that only 51% of the population, etc., etc. But it's back on Amazon because it's sold out.
Amazing.
So it is back there again. So I'm very glad. That was a message from Danny Binnington you were talking about when you said healthy homey.
Oh, yes.
Instagram was of, yeah. So hi, Danny.
It's hard to know who the person is behind the handle.
They're always different from their actual names. And of course, it's like, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm going to read two more. So Sarah says, Kate's book is by far the best one I've read so far, and I've read a lot. So good, in fact, that I listened to it on Audible first, then bought the hardback and a highlighter pen. I've done the same. I've highlighted and folded over the pages.
I mean, you know, if we can spread everything, you know, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And one more I'm going to read. It's shameful that we consider it a privilege, quote unquote, if we manage to get testosterone prescribed to us. I mean, that's the latest struggle, isn't it? Testosterone. I mean, I had it prescribed and my pharmacist wouldn't give me it. You know, I actually had the prescription. So I thought I'd got through that hoop. But then my pharmacist said, no, I'm really sorry. We can't give this to a woman.
I like the fact it's in a pink tube. I have it in my just drawer down here. And this is the private one. This is the Australian one, licensed in Australia, the Androfen one. But, you know, obviously I tried to get it from my GP and I can't. But I'm going to take in my book and go, please, can you find me to a menopause clinic? Let me get it. I mean, it's just, you know, it's bonkers, isn't it? And of course, women don't actually know about it at all. I mean, there's a few people who do, but I was looking into it for the book, and you know, again, these surveys, these studies, there's so few people in them. It's really difficult to get proper randomized control, you know, trials.
Yeah.
Really interesting stuff on testosterone and breast cancer, and women taking a bit of testosterone after breast cancer and the effect that has. And I mean, oh my God, what if that was important?
Yeah.
You know, and the idea that we're not looking into all of this is really shocking. And indeed, that study about testosterone protecting your heart health and it being really important for women, you know, women with low testosterone seems to have more heart attacks. So, I mean, astonishing. And, you know, it's prescribed on the NHS for libido. I don't think that's the main reason why we need it. I think we also need it for our brains.
Yeah.
It's women's brains haven't been considered until.
Absolutely. And look, I mean, there are so many amazing comments, but hopefully you'll read them back afterwards because I don't want to keep you any longer, Kate. But first of all, thank you for writing the book. Thank you for the amazing documentaries, because what that has done is just, it's gone, you know, global. You know, it's in a book, you don't know how many are reading it, but when it's on a television program, it reaches. And I know how many people, you know, have said they've had their light bulb moment like us. When is the next one coming out?
I think the beginning of May, but still filming, we're still editing, we're in complete chaos. So who knows?
Oh, well, look, Kate, good luck with the documentary, and the book is brilliant, and everyone go and get it and give it to your doctors, your husbands, your kids, and everyone else in between.
Yeah, well, thank you for all the work you're doing too.
Oh, thank you, Kate. All right, be well, take care, and good luck with it. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Kate. Bye.